Hey everyone, Value Add Mike here today to discuss our lending environment when it comes to multifamily deals. For those who don't know, my name is Mike Taravella, Value Add Mike, and me and my business partners manage over $80 million in commercial real estate, specifically in the multifamily sector. And today I wanted to share what's going on with the banks. I think many people are quick to point out SVB collapsing, several bank runs, what's going on with interest rates. And I think it's very important just to understand your bank's perspective when it comes to lending. So when looking at banking, yes, community banks and local lenders are probably your primary target to lend because your agency lenders are dealing with lower levered deals because all banks look at actual income. They're not looking at your pro formas. So for those LPs that are looking at there's a huge spread in rental income versus the market versus the actual, I think it's important to realize that agency debt may not be your best solution because they're going to only lend off of that actual income. Community banks look at it too. However, they're more willing to lend, I would say, than agency lenders because they realize their place in the market. However, community banks are based off Wall Street Journal Prime, and the Wall Street Journal Prime is around 8%. So your interest, even though the 10-year treasury and agencies are lending at 5.5%, community banks are lending at 8%. And it's important to realize that those local and community banks are looking for a certificate of deposits to continue to make sure they're shoring up their balance sheet while they're lending out money. And so for us as operators and for you as LPs, it's super important to realize that when looking at deals, you just have to understand your financing and the business plan. I haven't seen many deals on market where it's the light to medium value add. What we've seen is just a lot of older vintage out there that requires a lot more work. And also the 70s, 80s, 90s that we're targeting in terms of vintage, they're more of the mom and pop owner that has $500-$600 rents that could almost double day one in terms as long as you renovate. Don't be a slumlord. But it's important that you're putting in those renovations to making sure that you're getting market rents. And so with that, those are good deals on paper, but your lenders have to be on board with that heavy of a lift. And lenders are asking more and more about certificate of deposits. Yes, we say on the front end that we'll give to our banks the deposits of our business, but we're also trying to get more creative of our initial down payment. So whether it's putting into a 3, 6, 9, 12-month CD that's earning 5% to our investors, we're just making sure we're having those communications on the front end before we even get under contract because there's just a lot more things that we've heard are getting to the finish line on deals that happen in the final hour. So we're talking sooner to community banks just because they have the higher probability to close. We're talking about certificate of deposits before we even get under contract. And most importantly, we're putting extensions built into the contract because we want to make sure we have ample time to close. We want to make sure if anything happens with our initial financing that we have it there, that we have the opportunity to pivot if we have to. And I think it's super critical to over-communicate with your banks, updates, CDs, lines of credit, etc., because the market is changing so quickly and you want to be top of mind. So as a limited partner, when talking to your operators, make sure you're understanding, do they have extensions? What's the first banking option? What's the backup option? When is that non-negotiable in which you have to go to bank 2, and do you have time? So really important to make sure you understand these questions and just making sure that you get these answers to make sure your investment is protected, because especially if you're putting hard money down, which we have not seen as much lately, you want to make sure your investment is protected as possible. So if you have any questions, please reach out in the comments, comment, subscribe to the channel for more details. Make sure you're subscribed to our investor letter in the description. And until then, we'll see you next time.